Good morning. Good morning. This is our Eurythmy as Personal Practice Tuesday class, one in a series of mini classes for Eurythmy as a personal practice. And let me just say a few words of introduction. As you know, we've been doing these Eurythmy as personal practice classes for over a year and a half. Many of you have been with me since June of 2020, and some of you are new. I welcome you very much. This module, this series of Eurythmy as personal practice classes is based on the theme of our journey after death. And you know that this is part of a 5-part series that is matched with an Thursday evening lecture series in which I speak at some depth about how we can understand, from the point of view of anthroposophy and Rudolf Steiner's work, how we can understand our journey after death, our journey to the existence in pure spirit, and our continuing return to life and return to spirit, so that we are constantly involved in this ever-present evolution towards becoming godlike and self-realized in ourselves. So these courses are closely matched, although you can do one without the other. And you have probably noticed that only the first of this Eurythmy series and the webinar lecture series are available for public viewing. So these classes are only available for those of you who have registered. So thank you for showing up. I would also like to mention that I expect that there might be some people here in today's class, and indeed in this webinar series, who haven't done as much Eurythmy as others. Some of you have been with me for the last year and a half. And so I want you to know that at the end of every lesson, I send you the link for the recording of this video so you can watch it again and again. And I also send out an email with a PDF. And this is always the first page of this PDF, which tells what we're doing, how to make your own Eurythmy practice, and gives a series of the specific lessons that we're doing for this webinar, and also has then more specific indications of how to do the exercises. And especially for those of you who are new, you'll find it interesting to read those texts. And on my website, Eurythmy Online, there's recordings from many of the elements of Eurythmy that those of you who have been working with me for the last year and a half have already worked upon and developed. And so if you are new and you find yourself a little over your head with the exercises that we're going to be doing today, you can go back on the website and learn them. And I give a reference for how to do that. So one of the core elements of this journey of life after death is that we're speaking about the excarnation process as we leave our body, physical body, but also our life body and our soul body behind, and gradually, in a course of purification, return back to pure spirit. And we can access or understand this pure spirit to be in the width of space, in going back through the moon, to the sun, to the planets, even beyond the stars, until we come to the source of being. And then in the next 5 lessons that we'll do in March, we'll resume the story talking about coming back in and speaking about karma. And so our exercises in this webinar will be dealing with how we leave as we pass through the planetary spheres, but also a wonderfully creative and exciting process working with a poem. I was born of the shining of distant stars. We'll spend a great deal of time, 20 or 30 minutes in each class, working on this poem. And the way that I will teach it will really enliven all of these images for you. So that's where we're going, building on some of these fundamental elements of eurythmy, like how do I move in space? How do I carry myself? How do I open my feelings to the world? And so on. So that's what we can anticipate. As I told you last time, as you know, in eurythmy, we're dealing with our life body, our etheric body, which penetrates and permeates our physical body as long as we're alive, and then after death, begins to expand into the universe. Eurythmy has a wonderful capacity to enable us to feel how the etheric works through living processes. So we treat our body not just as a physical body, not just with mechanical movements, but we learn to move in time. With all of these movements in time, we're moving through our body with the fluidity of water. And so with that, I will open the space by speaking the poem that we're going to use as our opening poem in each class. As I said, this poem is attributed to the Cherokee people, although I don't have an accurate source on that. Just as the tree does not end at the edge of her roots and branches, just as the bird does not end at her feathers or with her winged flight, just as the earth does not end at her highest mountains, so I do not end at my arm, at my foot, at my skin, but reach ceaselessly outwards into space and time. And all time, including my voice and my thoughts, longs for the infinite. For my soul lives in the infinite, in the never-ending universe of stars. And the beauty of that poem is that it reminds us to always look for that relationship to the infinite, even as we are firmly grounded in practical life. How can we be conscious of our spiritual nature, even as we are firmly grounded? Because these values of anthroposophy, these values we develop in eurythmy, are about really being in the body with our spiritual awareness and not lifting out into some possible states of ecstasy. Spirit in the body, the divine temple. So now we'll begin our practice. Here you stand in your space. A opening gesture, an opening practice well known to many of you, and I'll introduce it again from the beginning. Imagine the stars above your head shining in the sky. Imagine one star as if that star is your personal guide, your angel, and let the light from that star shine down, finding you standing upright and tall, moral and present. And it sends its light into the top of your head, igniting a crown of stars. And it continues into your heart, warming your heart with love, and continues into your feet so you are grounded on the earth. And you feel that by presencing this light, you become worthy of your humanness. This posture is possible in every deed of your daily life. We just have to remember. And now spread your arms wide. The second step of this exercise, spreading your arms wide. Feel, in addition to above and below, feel right and left. Sense how your arms are meant to engage you in this world, with the natural world, with the community of people. Sense this world millions of miles below the stars, thousands of miles above the earth, your present moment. And now the third step. In addition, we'll deal with the directions of front and back. Notice, by taking a step forwards, how easy it is to relate to the world in front of us. This is just in plain sight for us. We call this the world of the senses. And now notice that normally we don't think much about the backspace. And see if you can imagine yourself opening the back door of your heart and know yourself to be in a state of not knowing, unknowing, but open yourself to the miracles of the divine behind you. And now, to culminate this opening exercise, put your hands on your heart. Breathe and feel inside my heart everything that I experience by living in space and time. Everything is inscribed in my soul. Herewith, we have the fruits of a life being built day by day. Now we take the second step in this exercise. Spread your arms wide. Feel the cross. Can you feel all 6 directions here? Here we stand in balance, but we will leave the balance and go, first of all, down. Notice I'm trying to stand straight. I'm not hunching. Be as straight as you can. But if you can, clench your fists and feel, I love being in flesh and blood and body. If you can't go down, it's okay to just stand straight and move your arms down, but feel the power of your body. Now feel the power of the light and go slightly up on your toes. I love the stars. And now come back on flat feet and feel, and I love this present moment here and now. Moving forward, the world of the senses pours me in. Moving back, the world of spirit releases me. Can you look through your back, the eyes in the back of your head? And now bring both arms together. Within my heart, the whole world is maintained, stays alive, is inscribed in my soul. And now my soul answers that with gratitude and love. I spread my arms wide. The hands become the hands of a peacemaker. Can you feel that? Now as you go down through space, feel that you are affecting the space, rippling through the space, and everything you go through feels your imprint, and you feel, may peace be below me. Turn your hands up. Feel yourself blessing space. Feel how your movement is changing space. May peace be above me. Feeling the back of your arms kindly. May peace be all around me. Coming forward, may peace be before me. May peace be behind me, and may peace be within me. Breathe. Really try to feel present in this moment in your body. What lives in our interior soul, deep within us, is the seed of spirit, the seed of God, what we're doing with our lifetime. And this is a perfect mirror, the essence of your existence given to you by God and all the other forces of creation. So with our next exercise, we let our heart forces, our spirit forces, connect to the world by opening ourselves as if we are a flower. Go beyond your fingertips. I don't end at the end of my arms. But now try, especially if you're new, to learn that in Eurythmy, we don't look up. We feel up. We expand our mind, but we don't slightly excarnate by looking out of ourselves, out of our eyes, nor do we close our eyes. Keep your eyes open and practice open gaze as your heart and your soul are open wide. And now let all of that come back into you and feel the divine gift of your life. And now open wide again. And we begin this movement of expansion and contraction. Breathing, not just physical breathing, but pulsing between large and small, universe and self, day and night, summer and winter, light and dark. This pulsation is a primal force in the entire universe. And you are aiming to feel this in your movement. And remember, it's not just your hands. You're moving this whole sphere of self. Go beyond your fingertips. Imagine yourself at least as big as your room, as big as your house, as big as your block, as big as the universe. And now bring that all back in and enhance fill your life with experiences. And once again, out to the stars. And back in again. Out to the stars. And now, as this exercise comes to a conclusion, drop your arms and feel the light above your head, the earth below your feet, your heart open, and yourself fully present. As you breathe, feel as if the spirit light has come into you from the backspace, from the God space, and is fully present in your heart. And envision yourself walking through your life with that consciousness. In that way, you can be a healer and a peacemaker and a true friend. Oh, it only requires remembering it. All right, we'll continue. I want to do that movement of contracting and expanding with walking, but we need to, once again, take a couple of minutes to lay the seeds for how we walk in Eurythmy. So I'm making myself in a diagonal so you can see my stepping well. As you stand, imagine your head crowned with light, with stars. Your head is the place where you do your noble thinking. But simultaneously, at the same time, feel your heart that we have just opened with our contraction expansion. Feel it to be a golden sun. And then also sense in a new and powerful way that you can feel your legs as well, all three sections, and they talk to the earth. Your legs carry you to your destiny. So let's take 4 steps forward, but try to stand very tall and let your feet carry your heart as you walk. And now walk backwards. And imagine that through your back, you can see the light of God. Walking forwards, you're walking into the sense world. Before you go backwards, change your inner gaze so that you see what's behind you. And again, walking forwards, walking back. There's no end to how often one should practice this. This time, pay attention to my feet, because when I walk, I'm very conscious of how I meet the earth with every step. That means I use my feet as consciously as I use my hands when I'm doing Eurythmy. And so I touch the earth, this is the important thing, with the front of the foot, because that enables me to really talk, to really sense the earth below me. And back again. That enables me to stand still, conscious of head and heart. 1, 2, 3, 4, and backwards. 1, 2. All right. I'll face forwards. And once again, if anyone here is new, you find wonderful descriptions of that in the PDF I sent out, and a whole lesson about how to do this walking practice on the website. But let's try again. 1, 2, into the world. Before I go backwards, I be conscious of that. 3, 4. Can we add the arm movements to that? I'm aware that that's a lot to think of, because now you have to think of yourself as a whole sphere. Everything coming up from your legs as well as into your arms. Feel your back. Go back, feeling as if God is behind you. And now find the image of God on the earth and the sense world, and feel the source of God behind you. And in front of you, the image, and behind you, the archetypes. There you go. Good. Once again, earth, spirit. And coming forward, it's like being born into the world. I come into this world of senses, and going backwards is like being released from the body after death, expanding. Coming in, engage. Feel yourself in this present sense world, the world of appearances. And now with wonder, open yourself into the backspace. Drop your arms now as we practice already, and feel yourself living as we do on the earth between the two worlds. Breathe well. Good. We're going to build the next exercise on this frontwards, backwards movement, as in order to enliven the feeling of what it is right after we die. So as we leave our bodies, we will start to expand with the etheric body. I speak a lot more about this on Wednesday night. I'm only touching this picture, but bit by bit, we will be moving into larger and larger spheres, circles, globes. So as we live on the earth, we experience ourselves in our bodies, point-centered, but as we leave the body, we start to become aware of the whole space around us, become aware of ever-growing spheres, ever-growing universes. So, well, let's start there. Start with your hands once out, and we'll get to the next exercise in just a second. Start small here. Feel when I'm in my body on the earth, I feel myself right here. And then after I die, and many more things for me to tell you, but I begin to inhabit a larger sphere as big as the earth, and then as big as the distance from here to the moon. And after I learn the lessons in that sphere, I grow to a bigger sphere, as great as the distance from here to what we call Venus. And then after I learn those lessons, I grow to a greater sphere, close to the sun, to that which we call Mercury. And then an even greater sphere, and I reach the periphery or the great globe of the sun. And from that point on, we begin to leave the earth behind and slip into even greater dimensions, Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. And beyond that, we're dissolved from the solar system. And then in the process of being born, we come from the beyond the solar system, enter it through Saturn and Jupiter and Mars to the great sphere of the sun. And from the sun, slip into the so-called inner planets, Mercury and Venus, Moon, and then into your body. Again, from the earth, expand yourself as a sphere, moon, then into the sphere of morality and love, into the sphere that Mercury then rules, into the great luminous sphere of the sun. Beyond that, we enter what we call spirit land, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, and beyond. And then we are in the great universe. And much later, after many, many, many experiences of cleansing, we come back through Saturn and Jupiter, Mars, the radiant sun space, and then we see the earth calling us. And we begin to pull the flesh and blood around ourselves, come to the moon, come to the earth. Rest for a moment. And now I want to elaborate or build upon that a little bit by practicing moving backwards as we experience our space expanding. To begin with, only as far as the expansion out to the sun. So imagine here you are in Earth space, and after you slip out of your body, you'll begin to experience a bigger sphere. We can do this with our imagination, but and then it becomes real, but physically it comes to birth through your intention. So you step back and experience that you're backing away from the earth, but your attention is still focused on the earth that you left. Step back a little bit more, you have more understanding, and imagine your mind as big as what we call Venus. Step back a little bit more, and we're further from the earth, we have more perspective and more understanding. And back to the sun. And with that sun experience, our understanding of our earth life becomes much more complete. And then we enter Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. We won't do that one yet. Let's go back from here, from the sun, through these inner planets, Mercury and Venus, Moon, almost ready to be born, Earth. And in the earth, you want to hold all of these planetary forces in your heart and leave the earth again, slipping out. This is where friends who have recently died are now. Further and further. And back to the sun space. And coming back in again. 1. And back to the earth. Rest for a moment. We'll pick that up again. I need to put in a little asterisk and a little footnote here. Serious students of anthroposophy may have read that sometimes the identity of Mercury and Venus are interchanged. And we learn from Rudolf Steiner that that's an old occult spiritual history. And so some of you will be or would have been expecting me to say we go from Mars to Mercury to Venus to Sun. But for many reasons, I'm choosing to call it like this, from Earth to Moon, and then to use the standard classical nomenclature and say, and the next planet is Venus, the planet that makes the 5-pointed star around the Earth, and then the one that goes to the 7-pointed star or 6-pointed star around the Earth, Mercury, before out to the Sun. So I'm using the present day nomenclature and not the alternative, but I understand it. I'm just not using that one. Thank you. And for those of you for whom that was too much, put it aside. All right. And again, leaving the Earth, you inhabit a moon sphere, the Venus sphere, the Mercury sphere, and the sun space, and back when you incarnate again. All right. The next step is really inviting those of you who've done at least a little bit of Eurythmy to remember that every vowel, every planet is connected with a vowel. And through these formative forces of the vowels, the planets have inscribed themselves into our language. The planets have inscribed themselves likewise into our whole physiology and into our soul. So we all know we speak about the archetype of Venus as she who gives us love, and the archetype of Mercury as the fleet-footed one, and so on. And so already last week, we began working with some of the sounds, and we're going to implant that now in what we're doing. So the sound of Venus, let me begin with that one, is the sound ah. And so let's open our hearts, start here. Remember, in Eurythmy, you must create the intentional feeling before you make a movement. So from your heart, experience wonder and grace and beauty and love, and open your arms in this open angle. And this is the movement that corresponds to what we set into motion when we speak. Ah. It's not too wide. It's not too narrow. It's ah. And it's not just a position, but it is streaming openness. When you get to your fingertips, ray out, and then let it go and give it to the space. So when we go through the Venus sphere, we live in a land and an environment and a world that is filled with gracious and open love. And Venus lives in your body. Venus lives in your soul with this openness. Ah. And again. Ah. Feel yourself moving through etheric space. There you go. As I said in the beginning, the movement flows through you from your heart, through your shoulders and your arms and your elbows, like flowing water. And it impacts the whole sphere that you're standing in. You stand in the world of awe. Ah. Good. Drop your arms for a moment. And as we practice from the beginning, head above, earth below, and your heart that you're conscious of knows how to walk the world in love, how to be a peacemaker. Mercury, on the other hand, has given us a different gift, the gift of the I am, the ego, the gift of lifting into the heights, even as we ground to the depths. So we start here at the heart again. The trick is to feel in two opposite directions, with your arms mirroring or exactly in balance to each other. Ground with one arm and fly with the other. And let that make your heart stronger, because your heart needs to be aware of both activities, not just your head, but your heart feels your body holding the balance. This is the sound E. Got it? And change hands. Other hand, E. And the other hand. Feel it from your heart and feel E. When we will and when we did live in the sphere of Mercury, the pure sphere of Mercury, everything that happened there had this feeling to it. E. Holding the balance between polarities. And from darkness, lifting into light and grounding that light. E. And we will learn in the lessons to come that the sphere of Mercury has to do with a person's religious or spiritual striving. Do I link my heart and my striving to spirit? E. Thank you. And let's put those together to create the sound I, which is the sound of the moon. Speak that for a moment with me, if you please. I. Notice how it begins with the sound ah and ends with the sound E. I. And if you pay really good attention to it, you will notice that there can be an A in the middle of it. And the German I has got more A in it. But in our English I, we swoop from ah to E. So once again, let's do this as we did even last week. So one version of the I could be ah, E. But because it's a gliding sound and movement, we do it like this. One arm is open, the other arm is with it. We have a semi-ah here, and we draw this ah downwards. And then this hand, the hand that was lower, continues its journey into the heights. So we have ah, E. Ah, and here in the middle of my heart, I feel myself touched, and I feel this movement as if we have a crescent moon here. Again, here I don't feel particularly centered, not like I do right here. I come into myself and I continue I. So it's this breathing between world and self and world. And rest. Good. Laying the seeds for your personal practice. We will now go through Moon, Venus, and Mercury, and then we'll do the Sun as well. You start here in the middle, as if you are ready to leave this Earth experience. By the way, this happens also every night, that in a microcosmic way, you go through these same spheres in your leaving at night to enter the dream world and the spirit world. So you leave Take one step back and imagine yourself to be in this Mercury, or this moon world. I. And then, having learned those lessons, step back into a world of gracious love. Ah. Imagine yourself able to spend some years there and learn those lessons and step back, and you're into the land of Mercury. Imagine all around you are beings moving with this integrity, human beings and spiritual beings as well. And to find your way in that land, you must have a resonance of E. Now we'll step back to the sun space, the great sun space, whose archetype is this sound, ow. So let's do that again. We worked that last week, but now we'll integrate it into this lesson. The ow sound has ah and oo in it, which is an open-hearted ah combined with an ooh. So one arm, right or left, is open in ah, and the other arm, left or right, is in ooh, the parallel. And so the ow has ah and oo in it, right or left. So try this sound. Let's build the ow and feel as if, perhaps I like to imagine as if I were an Egyptian worshiping the great sun god. Oh. Feeling the utter majesty of the beginning and the end of all things. All right. So let's move back from the sun, from the earth to the sun. I leave the earth, but in the first stage, I'm still beholding the earth, I, in moon space. I move back a little further, ah, and further, E. I begin to find more of myself as I move away from my addictions to the earth. Oh, I stand at the gate in the sun to the next level, what we call the spirit land, Devakan. But I want to save that for next week. Let's do this 5 more times. From center. Goodbye, earth. I hear you're really engaged when letting go. Ah, you begin to gain some perspective as you live among beings who are such love. E, beings of this great integrity. And ow, unimaginable love and light. And again, take your time when you practice this at home to really feel love, the reflection in the moon space, the great love, and imagine that whole world. And imagine this energy. And and again, you're practicing feeling soul in your movements. From the earth space, move back into moon space. Where you're really involved, I still imagine that I'm seeing the life I just lived. I step back into the Venus space. I'm still looking at the life I lived, but I have some perspective on it. I'm trying to make myself into a better person. E. And again. Hi. What did I go through in that life? And then with was I moral? Did I remember God or spirit in my life? Oh, how great is my universal understanding. All right, and one more time. And I'll just show you the next step that we'll complete next year or next week. I really feel I'm watching what I lived. I back away. I feel my backspace calling me, but I'm still looking at my reflection of what I experienced. And I remember this uprightness and out. And now, after the sun, we begin to move into, essentially we say we leave the earth behind us. We turn away from it. What I'm going to do now is walk a big circle around the earth or an outwinding spiral, as I will do next week, as I enter the world of Mars, O for Jupiter and Saturn, and then enter the higher realms. So that will be our step next week. And then for some of the planets, we're going to learn the planetary gestures. We'll learn more of them in March when we have our next sequence working even more with the incarnation process. But what I want to do with you now very, very much is to do the poem, which will be such a fruitful and fun thing for you to do at home. Let me speak this poem for you again, as I spoke it last week. It's called Birth by an anonymous author. I was born of the shining of distant stars. I drew their beams with me from afar. I was born of the gold of the radiant sun, of the light of the world ere the earth begun. Born I was of the silver eye of the guardian moon keeping watch on high. Born of the flame's intensity, born of the wild winds roaming free, born of the waves that lap the shore and the rock that hides the glittering ore. Born I was from out of the whole, I bear the world within my soul. All right. So, dear friends, especially those who have been working for a year and a half, you have learned so much already. And one of the things that I long for, that I miss by not teaching live classes, is that we're able to work much more with poetry and music in live classes. But in this module, I want to take you on a journey to learn a poem and hope that that I can give it to you almost as fruitfully as I could if we were in a live class. So I want to take you through this poem. And my first contribution here is how Rudolf Steiner says, after we die, after a person dies, in their relationship to language, the first thing that they lose are nouns. Interesting, nouns. That is, those who have died are not interested in mortgages, cars, taxes, money, their possessions, or any kind of thing, tables and chairs. They're interested in things that are moving in time. Because after we die, we leave this world of fixed things and are completely living in processes. And so these processes are our etheric body. This is why we need to live in time in order to come into relationship with those who have died. So when I practice speaking things, even if I say a noun, like the word stars, comes in this poem, stars. I don't just think of a star with my materialistic mindset, star, burning. I think of stars. I let that star become a process inside of me. Sun. Or if I say the word journey, for instance, journey, I see myself walking somewhere, journey. I don't just name it as if I were speaking of nouns like a shopping list. Everything needs to be experienced livingly, and that lifts it out of physical, materialistic language into the etheric world. Please print out the PDF that I've given you. Maybe some of you did that last week. And I want you to memorize this poem this week. The poem that's, let me go a little further. I'm sending out a second PDF, a new PDF this week, in which much of what I'm teaching you right now is contained. So print that one out as well as what you have from last week and learn the poem. And I'm going to speak it now, and I'll ask you to speak it back to me, or I won't hear you, but speak it as I do. And then we'll learn some movements for it. So the first line talks about the stars. Listen to how I say it and feel it. I was born of the shining of distant stars. Just say that much. I was born of the shining of distant stars. Already before you say it, think of stars. Think of shining stars far away. And now sculpt that image into space with your voice. A painter with words. Again, I was born. Wait, I have to do that again because I have to even begin with an I statement. Me. I feel myself being born out of nothingness. I was born of the shining of distant stars. And now continue. The next line says, and I see it, myself bringing stars with me. I drew their beams with me from afar. I say from afar, and I remember where they came from. Okay, again, those two lines. I was born of the shining of distant stars. They're all around here. And then I drew their beams with me as I was born from afar. Now, when I say I was born and go into the starry spaces, as a eurythmist, I want to go back and feel that I'm going into the spiritual space behind me and not into the sense world in front of me. So as you speak, you can feel that. I was born of the shining of distant stars. Now come into the front space with your sense of space. I drew their beams with me. Now remember your backspace, from afar. And now the next line, talking about the sun. Go back in your feeling. I'll speak it for you first. I was born of the gold of the radiant sun. Try it. I was born of the gold of the radiant sun. I'm going to hover back here for the rest of the line. of the light of the world. Try that phrase. Can you lighten up the whole world as you say it? Of the light of the world. And the line finishes with these words, ere the earth begun. And with these words, friends, I want to look back into the front space and think of our planet Earth down there in the future coming into being. So I'll do that whole line. Join me or just listen. I was born of the gold of the radiant sun, of the light of the world, ere the earth begun. I'll try that once more and try to notice how I stay in process from the first word to the end as the story unfolds. If you do that, you'll never read poetry like a shopping list ever. Everything comes alive if you can see what you're talking about and stay with it as you put it into words. Okay, the first two lines. I was born of the shining of distant stars. Coming to the front, I drew their beams with me from afar. I remember them. Next line, I was born of the gold of the radiant sun, of the light of the world, ere the earth begun. Way there in the distant, an earth will come into being. And now the line of the moon. Born I was of the silver eye. Last night was a full moon. Envision that. Born I was. Now go to your backspace of the silver eye and watch the moon rise in the sky as you say, of the guardian moon, keeping watch on high. Once again, I place that line in my backspace, mostly. Okay, from the beginning. I was born of the shining of distant stars. I drew their beams with me from afar. I was born of the gold of the radiant sun, of the light of the world, ere the earth begun. Born I was of the silver eye of the guardian moon, keeping watch on high. Now, those three lines are the lines saying part of my heritage as a human being is what I get from the cosmos, from the universe. And part of my heritage is this earth material. And so now the author says, I was not only born from there, but I was also born of fire and air and water and earth, the four elements. So as we do these next four lines, we won't go into backspace. We will use our experience of the front space. And I'll give you the line, the fire line. Born of the flame's intensity. Can you do that? Born of the flame's intensity. Right? Remember, on this line, you can see so clearly, we're not thinking about shopping lists. Just the noun flame has to come alive in you, and intensity must be felt like a verb, an activity. Born of the flame's intensity. The next one is about the wild winds, which is the air element. I'll say it first. Born of the wild winds roaming free. Okay. Follow me? Born of the wild winds roaming free. And now water, now you begin to feel heavy, no longer free like the air. Feel yourself viscous, watery. Born of the waves that lap the shore. Okay. Born of the waves that lap the shore. The last line is the rock, which stands in for everything in the earth element. And the rock that hides the glittering ore. And when I speak that one, I feel it, I make it as crisp as I can. Born of the rock that hides the glittering ore. And then our summary statement. Born I was from out of the whole. I bear the world within my soul. And so at that last line, as you saw, we start as big as the universe and bring it into your arms. All right, I want to really invite you to practice speaking it that way, this living way, all week, and explore the journey of language, the journey of really thinking and resurrecting things in your speech. And indeed, that can invoke something that finds its way into the spiritual world as well. For instance, some of you are already familiar that Rudolf Steiner says we can read sacred texts to those who have died and they will understand it, but they'll only understand it if we make it alive in ourselves and don't just think it mechanically. So now, after you have spoken it, we're going to develop sounds for these lines as well. And today we won't do much, but I want to develop a way of moving into backspace and front space. So when we do the first line about the stars, you will, remember, you won't speak when you do eurythmy, but we'll practice these senses of space. I was born of the shining of distant stars. First of all, I want you to make a great, beautiful B as you think the word born. And as you do that, walk backwards like this. I was born. And now I'll teach you later the different sounds for the rest of the poem, but we're like this, of the shining of distant stars. And now walk forwards with your back full of stars. I drew their beams with me. And now take a tiny step backwards and feeling them one more, from afar. Okay. That's our first practice here. So try again. I was born. Keep going back. Of the shining of distant stars. Come forwards. With a comet tail, I drew their beams with me from afar. Try again. I was born of the shining of distant stars. I drew their beams with me from afar. All right, you'll continue by going back for the sun line, again with the big B. I was born of the gold of the radiant sun, of the light of the world. And now, remember, you think of the earth, the material world, the light of the world ere the earth begun. And now on the moon line, we'll just go back, but we'll think of the moon rising in the sky. So we'll go back slowly. Born I was of the silver eye, it's going up, of the guardian moon, keeping watch on high. All right. Now we come to the 4 lines of the elements. And for today, we'll just go forwards and backwards with these 4 lines. Born of the flame's intensity, born of the wild winds roaming free. Now wet bee, born of the waves that lap the shore. And the rock, this one doesn't have the word born in it, rock that hides the glittering ore. Okay, let's do those 4 elements again. Forwards with fire energy. Born of the flame's intensity with air element. Born of the wild winds roaming free. And now wet. Born of the waves that lap the shore. And the rock that hides the glittering ore. Now, like we learned last week, on the last line, we do know already a few sounds. Born I was from out of the whole, a great big O. And now I bear the, now we have the inside out O, world. Palms out. I bear the world within my soul. Let me show you what we will have learned within the next weeks, like this. I will speak the poem as I do it, but remember, if I'm doing it by myself or if you're doing it by yourself, don't speak it. And it will be, this is what you'll learn, I was born of the shining of distant stars. I drew their beams with me from afar. I was born of the gold of the radiant sun, of the light of the world, ere the earth begun. Born I was of the silver eye, of the guardian moon, keeping watch on high. Born of the flame's intensity, born of the wild winds roaming free, born of the waves that lap the shore, and the rock that hides the glittering ore. Born I was from out of the whole. I bear the world within my soul. So in the little bit of work that we practiced today, going forwards and backwards, and also really enlivening your thinking and your mental imaging as you work with the poem, you enter the world of the living etheric space. And that is already opening the door to be able to converse with, to create relationship, and to nourish those who have died. And in our understanding of those who have died, if people are talking to them and continuing to send them love, even as an acknowledgement of the fact that they are still consciousnesses in our sphere, if we find a way to send living thoughts to them, we give them help in that sphere, and they can also sometimes be with us in our quest for spiritual growth. So this Eurythmy practice is in part to enliven you, enliven us, so that we have these capacities of life now and after death. Truly, after you die, all these fruits will stay with you. Eurythmy is such a preparation for this time after death, but it also creates the bridge into the spiritual world. Thank you so much for showing up. Hope to see I hope some of you will see me on Thursday. And be well. Be well in all ways, body, soul, and spirit. Thank you.